Hi, Robin. How are you? I'm well. It's great to meet you. Sure thing. I think that we're all human, and human emotions and human behavior drives all of us in uniquely different and yet very similar ways. And that, as particularly when we're approaching points of transition in our lives, so whether it's retirement or a career change or strategy change, we make emotional decisions centered around money. And my experience there and my value, I think my greatest level of value to clients is just having conversations and developing transparency around those topics to help them make more informed decisions and ultimately live high quality lives, achieving whatever goals and potential they want to achieve. And so I think that can go many, many directions, and I'll let you drive that conversation. I know a lot about real estate. I mean, I invest in real estate and my clients have real estate, but I just wanted to be clear from the purposes of compliance and transparency. That's not my primary, um, you know, area of focus and expertise. That's a good question. I'm still trying to figure that out. 41 years later, it's farberov. Yeah, farberov. Yeah. Hmm. Sure. No, no problem at all. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Understood. I do, but in the context of financial planning. So, for example, if I buy this property, what are the consequences to my long term net worth? Is this going to be accretive or detrimental to my long term objectives? Do I have the cash flow? Do I have the liquidity? Are there trade offs between this particular property or another property or another investment vehicle? And that's generally where the conversation go. I don't I stay away from saying whether it's a good investment, but I do talk about my outlook on interest rates, and I feel like I've got a very good pulse on long term rates, and I'm not talking about long term in terms of duration of the rates, but having a long term picture of the direction rates are headed, and that can potentially influence decision making one way or the other. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's all about building financial muscle, and that the earlier you start to build that muscle, the better off you'll be. And the foundations of planning are the same whether you have $1,000 to your net worth or $25 million. I think the complexities obviously increase, and there's a lot more focus on tax strategy and estate planning and so on as the complexity increases. But at the early stages, it's about accumulation and growing and so on in the most cost effective manner and building the right muscles. But I do have sometimes legacy clients, sometimes accommodative relationships. Children of very wealthy clients and so on, or grandchildren, and the foundation is the same. The conversation is the same in terms of building a financial plan, understanding what your balance sheet looks like, understanding what your income and cash flows look like, and not making any decisions until you have very clear clarity around those topic areas. Okay. So it's a partnership. Compound Planning is it's a brand. It's a technology company that creates effective, best in class tools for financial advisors to serve their clients and optimize that experience. And then they give the advisors like myself independence to be a fiduciary. And in my case, I co-brand with Compound, but I do have my separate entity, legally speaking. Sure, sure, yeah. And I won't provide that nuance. I will just say I'm a senior wealth advisor with Compound Planning. Yeah, as far as the audience goes, that's good enough for me. Okay, sounds great. Sure. Name was perfectly pronounced, unless you ask my parents, and they'll probably give you a different iteration. So, first of all, it's great to be on the podcast. I love the name of the podcast, and I look forward to a very good conversation. In short, as you mentioned, senior wealth advisor and principal at Compound Planning. I generally work with ultra high net worth clients in that $5-10 million and up range, but I have a plethora of clients that run the gamut, and my clients are generally founders, executives, ultra high net worth families, and the focus of my work is really around creating transparency around their financial plans, tax strategy, estate planning, and investment management, and ultimately creating clarity in their lives. But whether you're a $25 million client, a $5 million client, or aspiring $1 million client, ultimately the framework of what we do is for folks is very similar. Although the complexity changes as we go up and up in net worth, it's all about building transparency and helping clients achieve clarity and achieve the best lives that they want to live. So when you start exercising in life, right, you don't start with a 400-pound barbell, right? You have to start small, right? You have to build the financial, or in this analogy, you just have to build the muscle to be able to build up step by step, without ultimately hurting yourself by going too far too fast. And it's the same, and perhaps even more so in the world of finance, right? Personal finance, you have to build financial muscle, and you do that by creating baby steps and taking and having the right financial nutrition and having the right advisory team around you to give you feedback and ultimately ensure that you have transparency around the decisions, and you have goalposts that you set for yourself that once achieved you can build from there and take that next level. And so what I just generally recommend is anyone getting started off, regardless of the level of net worth or capacity to build that net worth, is have a balance sheet that is very transparent. You know exactly what everything looks like, and it might be very simple. It could be one account and checking account and one credit card, if that. And then also have a very transparent income statement that you track. Essentially, a budget, right? Where you know what your cash flow is, and then from there, then you can make informed decisions. If you have a positive cash flow every single month, right, then you can make informed decisions about how do you take that positive cash flow every single month and either save it to create a rainy day fund, or invest it to achieve a higher rate of return. The most important kind of aspect of personal finance is this idea that if you're not an asset owner, you're losing money over time, right? Inflation officially historically is 3% a year. So that essentially means the money that you earn and you accumulate loses value at about a 3% a year pace. And so over 10 years, that's 30%, right? And so you have to invest money to be able to achieve just basically purchasing power parity and making sure that your dollar doesn't lose value. So your investments ideally will earn more than 3% a year. And so that's where you want to invest. But you can't invest if you're in debt. You can't invest if you have negative cash flow. And you certainly can't invest if you have no idea what any of those topics are. And so that's where I would start. The great news for anyone starting out today is that there are so many tools and resources, either free or nominal, $10 a month, that provide this level of clarity that one could not achieve 30, 50 years ago. Yeah, absolutely. A number of folks actually come to me on a personal level and say, off the record, confidentially, my wife and I, they've got a young family, and we've got $25,000 in credit card debt. Should we contribute to a 401k? Right? And so, and I asked them, well, what's the interest rate that you're paying on this credit card debt? Because if you have a 0% interest rate, a credit card for 18 months, right, that's one equation, versus if you're paying 25% on that $25,000 in interest. Well, what would be the benefit of investing in a 401k that's going to earn you perhaps best case scenario 10% when you're paying 25% to a creditor that will break down your door if you don't pay them off. So rule of thumb, always pay off any debts that are above that 3% threshold, so to speak. In terms of, but a lot of the problem is a lot of times these debts are not major in size. Sometimes it's $2,000, $3,000, but they accumulate and they add up, and folks kind of, because it's a pain point in their lives, they don't like to think about it. It's an afterthought, and therefore it just accumulates. Sometimes it's in your spouse's account, and they're not thinking about it. So that's where I think, especially for families, but individuals as well, a budgeting app, one that comes to mind that I've heard a lot of folks use is Monarch. I haven't personally used it. Yeah, it's Monarch. like the king, like a king. The Monarch app is one that a lot of folks use. It's a great tool. In my generation, it was Mint.com, right? And I know that there are countless other apps that are available, but that one does come to mind as a top of mind. We also at Compound we have a budgeting. We have an app that folks use that I often share with clients, even pro bono, just to clients or prospective clients or people who just would benefit from this resource. Monarch is obviously a private app. Anyway, there are a lot of different tools available, and I highly recommend if someone wants to kind of find out, you feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to chat with them about it. Sure. Right. So to answer the second question first, it's a pretty straightforward answer. If you have debt, pay it off first. But after that debt, then focus on your retirement plan, and at a minimum, assuming you can afford it, is to contribute up until the match that the company will offer you. And generally, companies offer there are different rates, but sometimes it's 50% of the first 3% of your salary or whatnot. And so find out what that number is, and essentially it's free money. So if you have the free cash flow and you don't have the debt, then it's a no-brainer. If you don't, there are some complexities. I advise to have a conversation with someone about the pros and cons about it. I think to your first point, uh, loss aversion is such a common theme for all human beings. Whether you're worth $100 million or whether you're worth you've got a negative net worth right now, we I mean there are psychological studies that have been done where people are more likely to talk about you know uh, their private lives with their family than they're about their finances. Because there's just so much sensitivity around it. I'm sure it goes back to the our days as animals, way back when. Um, because simply speaking, if you don't have money, you don't survive, right? And if you feel like you're losing money, then that's a pain point that we want to run away from. So whether you're losing money in a stock portfolio and you don't want to look at your portfolio when it's down, or whether you've already accumulated losses but you're afraid to harvest those losses, cut your losses, so to speak, on a poor investment, because that's ultimately admitting that you made a mistake and you're not getting that money back. Or it's just that credit card bill that you're just so embarrassed to even talk about it, either to face the facts yourself, or talk it over with a spouse. Those are all illustrations of the same kind of behavioral weakness that we all suffer from. And the way you overcome that is through conversation, and you create conversation through transparency. In the I was going to say, in the world of digital finance, where money is no longer physical, but it's digital and it's just a number on a screen, it makes that reality even more pronounced. Because first of all, when you have $25 million, right, a 1% down day in the stock market is a significant amount of money that you are down. At the same time, you don't actually reap the benefits of that $25 million other than just through a number on a web page or on a phone app, right? And but at the same time, when you have $25 million, right, you have so many expenses that accrue every single day in your life. And so you feel the expenses, right? Talk about loss aversion, right? You feel money exiting and people sending you bills for this and that, but you don't really see the benefit of 10% annualized gains on a $25 million portfolio. Same can be said, for someone that doesn't have those assets yet, but on a different scale. First and foremost, I don't want to belabor the point about the radical transparency on the balance sheet, but once we step onto the next stage, I think there is so much noise in the market. Right, on the one hand, we have so much access to technology and resources that no one in history has ever achieved. Right, someone with no education can use ChatGPT and essentially um, and essentially get access to information that PhDs in finance have access to, right? And you can have conversations about trade-offs between various different decisions. And so people can make very informed decisions about any topic nowadays that they never were able to make with any level of knowledge. However, there's a lot more access to noise and information and chaos, so to speak. And that makes decision making actually even more difficult in some respects, because everyone has an opinion now, and it's an informed opinion. And so there's so much nuance, and that's where going back to the basics, right, of having a plan, having an advisor, right, at what level, whatever level you're at, having someone to be able to talk through these decisions through. And who knows, maybe that's just AI that you have those conversations with if you can't afford an advisor. And I just want to point out that, sure, advisors like myself generally work with the highest net worth people in the country, in the world, but there are advisors that work on an hourly basis and will charge $100 an hour for a conversation, right? There are always levels of trusted advisors who are fiduciaries that people can gain access to. It's a question of, do we value that advice? Are we willing to pay for it? Um, but I can assure you, if you don't pay for it now, you'll pay for it later. So that's what I would say: is filter out the noise. And once you have clarity around the balance sheet, you can filter out the noise. Now you can make more informed decisions about how to invest and where to invest. There are millions of investment vehicles, and it's a question of, like, what's your goal, what's your outcome. If you were to make this investment, this is something I ask clients or prospective clients all the time, and I think this is a great framework. If you're having this conversation 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years from today, what needs to have happened during this period of time for you to say, wow, I made the right decision, right? And if that answer is, I need to earn 10% annualized on my money, or I need to have an income stream that's generated from this investment, or whatever the case may be, now you can back in and make informed decisions about whether the prospective investment vehicles will achieve that goal, and then you kind of go from there. So start with the goal in mind, and then go backwards all the time, all the time. Um, sure. Well, I think it's around longevity risk, right? They have decisions in life that, or they have certain transitions in life that they go through, that they want to they want to think about buying a property. Perhaps there's some sort of change in their life, death, divorce. Their life happens while we make plans, right? We make plans and then life happens, and so it's generally it's when clients are my clients, they're already at a level where they have enough wealth not to worry about whether I have enough. If assuming all goes well, right? Assuming the trajectory that they were on when they met me continues uh, to forever, but it rarely ever does, right? There's health, there's death, there's divorce, etc. And therefore, when those changes occur, sometimes they still want to achieve the lifestyle that they've come accustomed to, but their cash flows are different. Their debt situation is different. A lot of times, some clients have highly paying jobs, right? Especially in the world of technology, where my firm focuses on, and then those jobs go away, right? And then how do you achieve those same goals and that lifestyle, the lifestyle choices that you made when the income is no longer there? So I think those are the conversations that I generally have. But you can go all the way, filter that all the way down to someone getting started out in the world of finance. Personal finance is just, what are you trying to achieve? Do you have the cash flow to be able to achieve that? If you make X investments every single year, let's say on a monthly basis, here are the projections, right? That's just math, and either that'll get you to where you want to get to or not. And if you don't get there, we can generally pinpoint why that's the case. So it's all about transparency. First thing is talk to an advisor. A fiduciary advisor is very, very important, and that's a nuance that I'll stress over and over again, because so first and foremost, there will be tens of trillions of dollars that will pass over uh, in wealth over the next probably decade or so, from the baby boomer generation to my generation and beyond. And the consistent theme that I've seen is that very rarely do boomers talk about wealth to their kids, and very rarely do they include them in those discussions. Generally speaking, they don't have the financial muscle, or the muscle, so to speak, to make informed financial decisions. They don't have the relationships. They don't have the trusted advisors. And very often they look at wealth very, very differently than their parents and grandparents did. And so, go ahead. Sure. Exactly right. They don't, and therefore the level of wealth that they may inherit is going to be so dramatic. It can change their lives for the worse. I see it all the time. Families are split, siblings are divided. There's People don't trust. One sibling has one advisor, another sibling has another advisor, all giving different levels of advice. No one knows what to do. It creates chaos, and it's really unfortunate that wealth actually is as they say, more money, more problems, right? Wealth is not a solution to one's problems. It could actually be the creator of the problems. I think back to behavioral finance and loss aversion. All of a sudden you become paranoid, right? You go from maybe $100,000 to your name to $10 million to your name. I don't want to lose it. It becomes your primary point of concern. And then of course you have folks that see someone with that amount of wealth, and they will start trying to convince them to invest in vehicles, and unless you have a baseline on which to make informed decisions, it's very, very difficult to make those decisions prudently. And so that's where I think it's absolutely critical, foundational for any someone that will likely pass on wealth to future generations, to include them in conversations sooner rather than later. so they can start building that muscle. Otherwise, that wealth can really quickly go away. Yeah, well, first and foremost, everyone should have a trust, irrespective of their level of wealth. A living trust that outlines exactly where wealth, how wealth is going to flow once they pass away. I've seen it actually in families where you have one spouse that does the finances, and then they pass away, and then the widow all of a sudden has no idea what to do, or how to do things, and it creates a lot of issues there as well. But assuming that wealth is passing to the next generation, so a living family trust for, firstly avoids probate. I think that's, gosh, can you imagine inheriting $5, $10 million or $1 million, and that money going through a court system for 12 months and costing hundreds of thousands of dollars in costs, right? At a time when things are incredibly emotional. So, and that's a best case scenario, right? In terms of time, cost, and eventually gaining access to that money. So the trust alleviates that burden. Beyond that, right, you can create trust that once there's a transition event where someone passes on, a revocable trust becomes an irrevocable trust for the benefit of minors or whomever, and where money is distributed as an income stream for specific purposes, and they cannot actually tap into the principal until a certain age, or perhaps ever, and then it's goes to the next generation thereafter. I highly recommend, if there's significant wealth that we're talking about, that these trusts are in place. Yeah. Yeah. So first, to the first question, I highly recommend getting a corporate trustee. Right, there are a lot of services. Feel free to reach out to me afterward. That basically you put their name on the trust, but they don't actually charge you. Some will want to review, the documents before being appointed. Most will, but they generally won't charge you until they become the corporate trustee. And I do think that when there are siblings and when there's potentially um, some sort of conflict that could arise, and even when you don't think a conflict will arise, it most often does, of some kind. Having that impartial party, and it's not that expensive. It's a couple $1,000s a year. It's absolutely worth it, right? So I think, I mean, you can simply go onto Google and type it, corporate trustee. The one thing I would recommend is that it's an independent trustee. Very often, these trustees are people, at banks or large institutions. I don't recommend that unless, of course, it's a major major portfolio, major estate. But when we're talking a couple of $1 million or less, I think having an independent fiduciary trustee. Type those words into Google. You'll find a number of them highly rated. You can look at Yelp, etc., and interview a number of those folks and see what their process looks like and what they recommend to do. But I actually looked into that for one of my clients more recently, and I had some really informative conversations as well in terms of their process, their fees. Every single day, every single day. There are companies like Schwab and Fidelity, right? The big institutions that you can have investment accounts there. They can be appointed as those trustees as well, assuming you have accounts there. But I recommend just going with a local fiduciary. I think that's a prudent approach. To answer your second question, I think the term eludes me. I think it's called per streepis. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but essentially, you have there's terminology that you put into the trust that whatever portion, let's say it's 25% that's allocated towards one child. If that child predeceases the other siblings, etc., their portion will go to that person's heirs and not go into the remaining 75%. So it's a very common term, and so I'm sure any trust attorney will know what that is. What I will say is that, and this is common with retirement plans like an IRA, a 401k, etc. So outside the scope of a trust, retirement plans actually don't go into a trust. So retirement plans, IRAs, 401ks, etc., they can be mentioned in the trust, but they have beneficiary designations, and those beneficiary designations have those particular designations, whether it's per streeps or it goes to the remaining beneficiaries. Well, I think it's actually leaving things to their children, right? To make not to leave wealth to their children, but not to leave the decision making around that wealth to their children. And I think that's a big part of it because there's so much emotion, but also very often what happens between when children know that wealth or perhaps significant wealth is coming to them, right? Perhaps it's in the future, and it changes the dynamic of the parent child relationship in a way that's oftentimes unpleasant, where the parent assumes that the children should do more for their parents because look at how much money we're bequeathing to them, or the children feel like they don't have to work as hard, or because they're going to have money that's coming their way, and it just changes dynamics in a way that's just very, very unfortunate. And so oftentimes parents don't even tell their siblings or their children what to expect, but that creates distrust, etc. Well, that's where I think transparency is valuable, but also having that impartial third party uh, being in the equation is going to alleviate a lot of those potential stress points. So I would say Starting with the second question in mind, a lot of businesses struggle with the idea they're successful in terms of annual cash flow, but businesses oftentimes don't have a transition plan. They don't have a succession plan. And oftentimes the biggest reason that exists is because anytime owners know that if they were to sell the business, the prospective buyer would likely not treat their employees in the same way that they treat their employees, and those employees have really no desire to stick around beyond this generation of ownership, and therefore the a prospective buyer won't value the business in the same way that it's actually on a dollars and cents terms should be valued. And so retention is a critical piece of that. And some businesses have the ability to retain in different ways than others. I think obviously, if you have the ability to do so, offering shares in the business to employees that are vested over a period of years I mean, obviously that creates complexity in terms of structure and so on. But if one has the ability to offer some sort of ownership in the business to the prospective employee or to the current employee, especially one that's been there for many, many years, that's the biggest point of retention. Secondarily, you pointed out benefits. 30 years ago, creating a benefit package for employees was very cumbersome, expensive, and so on. Now it's in much, much cheaper, very often nominal cost, and actually mandated now by the state of California to have minimum baseline benefits packages through the state, for example. So I would recommend having a conversation with. I mean, there are many benefits brokers that will guide employers through what the benefits are. So at a minimum, having a 401k, if you have 5 plus employees, you can do that. There are even more simple ways to do that through a SEP IRA. There are a lot there. When we talk about as we talked about earlier, every company is unique, but I think the key is that if you treat employees like they were in your shoes, and give them all the benefits that you could afford to offer them. And sometimes, like I said, it's just setting it up. You don't even have to contribute to a 401k, but having a 401k allows an employee to contribute 23,500, maybe depending on their age, 30,000 plus annually, where they couldn't do that in a traditional IRA. And so there are a lot of benefits in the corporate world that the tax code has created to encourage this type of saving. And so just creating that structure is important. But I think an underlying theme that I find in so many small businesses, among so many small businesses, is that they are so busy focusing on growth or survival, right, that they very often overlook their employees. They very often overlook themselves and their own financial well-being, right, first and foremost, and they don't take the necessary steps to protect themselves nor their employees because they're struggling just to make it. And that's where having a conversation with building a team, just as I do as a as I call myself like a family office advisor, a quarterback of a family's financial situation. What I do when in that role is I build advisors around my clients. So there's a CPA, there's a trust attorney, there's a corporate attorney, as needed, right? And everyone has transparency. Well, when you're a small business owner, you should do the same thing, and it's easier said than done, because a lot of times these folks will only work with you when you have a certain amount of revenue that you generate for them. But there are other folks that will work on a commission basis if they sell you something, and so they're always trying to sell you something, and that becomes a little bit challenging as well. I don't know what to do. So having someone who is a true fiduciary help you oversee that process, even if it means paying them as a consultant a couple $1,000s a year just to give that level of oversight, I think it's incredibly valuable. CFP, general rule of thumb, if someone has a CFP behind their name, will typically be a fiduciary. And if you need just hourly counsel, whether on the personal side or on the business side, that's the route that I would recommend everyone take. And if you go online, there are networks, whether it's the CFP website, or there's a platform called Garrett Financial Network. You can go on, type the the type of planning needs that you need, whether it's on a personal level, business level, and find that individual in your location who can offer that advice. And it doesn't even have to be local, right? Now you can be national, and get that advice. It's not expensive. Yeah. Sure. So I would say, just to summarize, we're living in the best time in the world to be able to achieve whatever we want to achieve. We have the access to technology that people just couldn't even dream of even 5 years ago, at our fingertips, at for free, right? And therefore anything is possible. But at the same time, that level of technology creates noise and chaos that can be overwhelming. And it's like going to a library and trying to find one book, right? There's just so many options, and where do I even start? And that gets people, um, uh, that 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 it just creates that overwhelm that prevents people from action. It's kind of like, you gain 50 pounds more than you should have, and now you have to go to the gym. Just the thought of doing that is overwhelming, and therefore, why do I even start? Right? Like, it's not even worth it. You got to start somewhere with baby steps. And so, what I would recommend for anyone who wants to get started is go to your version of AI, ChatGPT, Meta, Grok, Gemini, right? And simply ask them the questions. Have a dialogue with them. It's a phenomenal resource. I would simply put it like this: you know, uh, as a fiduciary, right? As a fiduciary, that is a key word. What advice would you give me in my situation? And describe that situation very, very clearly. If I were to meet with advisors, right? What questions should I ask them, right? What are 10 topics? What are 100 topics that I should be thinking about today in my world, right? The problem with AI right now is it hallucinates. So don't ask it to give you advice necessarily on tax strategy, or which retirement plan to have. But there's enough information there that they can give you the most amazing information at your fingertips. I see clients come to me, or prospective clients come to me all the time with questions that I know that they got from these sources, but they still come to me thereafter to verify and clarify and so on. And that's a tool that I think everyone should be using, at a minimum, to to get to the right advisor, to know what questions to ask, and then ultimately to build the financial muscles that one needs to build, uh, to achieve whatever level of success they want to achieve, and then have patience. And through that transparency, right? We talked about the budgeting app at the beginning, right? Don't start investing unless you have a balance sheet or a budgeting app, that you are using. Full stop. Right? Don't start investing if you have debt that's growing at 20-30% a year. Pay it off. Right? Once you surmount overcome those two obstacles, right? Now you can go to ChatGPT, and you can have those conversations before that. But then you can have construction. What's that? Not at all. Mm-hmm. Right. It's like going to a doctor and asking them to give you advice without them knowing anything about you, right? Medical guidance, right? They have to know everything to your blood type and so on, and your medical history to be able to hopefully give you advice that's reasonable. But if you go to an AI agent and don't provide that information or don't know what information to provide, then you're not going to be in a good place. But again, it's an exciting time to be around if you want to achieve wealth. At the same time, I do think it's the most volatile time in the last 50 years, which is going to create chaos and opportunity, right? Those that are in the accumulation phase of their lives, volatility is your friend. Don't let volatility scare you away from making decisions, right? Allow volatility, take advantage of when markets sell off or real estate market tumbles or whatnot. All right, it's scary if you have a $10 million portfolio or a property, right? How do you manage that volatility? But if you have $1,000 and you're contributing monthly, let volatility be your friend. The more the market drops, the more of a discount you get when you buy high quality assets that will appreciate over time. And so don't let the be a driver of inaction, but rather encourage you to participate. And that's the key. Inflation will eat away at your wealth, guaranteed. 3% a year at a minimum. Since 2020, 25 to 30% of your purchasing power officially has been eroded. And so if you were sitting in cash, that's your dollar is 25% less valuable than it was then. And it will continue to evaporate at a rapid pace given the level of debt that we have in the country, right? The only way the country is going to grow out of the debt burden is by inflating their way out of the situation or growing their way out of it. But the way you participate in that growth is by investing. So no matter the level of your income or balance sheet, start building those muscles. Start investing $50 a month, $100 a month, whatever it is, $25 a month. Build that muscle and then grow your way to success is the key takeaway. Sure, I recommend just going to LinkedIn and finding me there or on X. I do a lot of communicate with the audience quite often there with my thoughts and musings on the world. But you can also email me directly at dimitry.farberov at compoundplanning.com. Go to Compound Planning, find me there by name. There are many ways. Google me. I'm pretty famous or infamous. So I'm readily available and I'm happy to chat with you pro bono, irrespective of how much money you have, any questions that you have. I'm happy to have a conversation. If you have $1 to your name or if you have $100 million to your name and you just want to bounce some ideas off of me, I'm happy to do that. Thanks, Robin. Have a great day. Cheers.